Welcome back to Lights Camera Media. This week we'll be discussing the film The Artist is Present, directed by Matthew Akers and Jeff Dupree, as well as the music video Cruising to Self-Soothe by Ecca Vandal. In context of the articles, The Mirror Stage as Formative of the Eye Function by Lacan, and Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema by Laura Mulvaney. I'm Ava.
I'm Peter.
I'm Michael.
I'm Aisha. Okay, so in this film, we're kind of getting like a
The
there's a
lead
lot
up
going.
to
The
art
lead up to
installation.
a big art installation by Marina Abramovic that is called The Artist is Present, where basically she's having like different various young artists kind of recreate some of her most famous performance art pieces, which are very like striking, very obscene and just kind of they're harsh things to watch. But her big like thing is where she like sits in the chair, what is it, for like 3 months and is just like staring into like various like the audiences and you kind of I don't know, you get just like an idea of who she is as an artist from this documentary.
Yeah. I think this film is more related to the Lacan piece of the mirror stage. And kind of there are moments of the male gaze in there of most of her performance art is her naked in front of a live audience. But I think it more relates to the mirror stage of like seeing somebody in that moment and it being real instead of the imaginary where we kind of live. Like her art puts you in the real instead of in the imaginary.
I agree with that because would the imaginary be kind of the more male gazy, like, oh, maybe you're like before you go, I feel like a conspiracy theorist. Before you go to the art museum, maybe you're like, oh, like about to see this woman naked, so exciting. And then you go, and then it's just like something so bodily harmful and like
Yeah.
not
I,
sexy at all.
I think it's kind of touched on when they address one of her earlier exhibits that isn't replicated, where I think this is her, and I could be wrong, but I'm like 95% sure it's her. She had like different things that you could inflict on her. She starts out fully clothed. You can cut pieces of clothes off of her. And there's a gun present for the entire thing where the
Yeah.
audience can shoot her and kill her. Like, that is an option that they are given. And
Mhm.
like they kind of mention it, like how quickly people can turn to these really dark things to inflict on somebody else when they're allowed to. And it kind of going back to Lacan, there's neurotic and psychotic, and how quickly neurotic people can turn psychotic when given the option, if that makes sense. But
When there's no sense of, I can do whatever I want and there's just going to be, this isn't going to come back at me at all. And some people just do lose control and it's kind of scary.
mhm.
Yeah, it was like a mirror-like relationship where like participants they kind of like confronted or like used their own emotions and like self perceptions through her performance
Yeah,
or and her presence. So
yeah. And I think the also the training that she does for the 3 days, the intensive that she does with the other performing art or performance art individuals who will become part of her show, where she like takes them to her house, and for 3 days they can't make phone calls, they can't do anything, they just have to live and do what she says. And I feel going from the imaginary to the real is when you have to walk through the two naked people facing each other, because that's an uncomfortable thing to have to do, but it's how you get into the exhibit. So like there being a clear boundary between the imaginary and the real in that moment.
it's like like in like Lacan like terms, I guess, like you could like as like sort of a what's the word, like reenactment, I guess you could say, of like mirror stage. Like she seeks like recognition and like maybe validation from the other. Like as in like seeing like their own mirror perception, like how they maybe perceive like how they're feeling, and it's like, oh, you can inflict it upon this person, I guess.
Yeah. I think also her mirroring the people across from her when they sit in front of her, they have to face her, look her in the eyes. And I feel that there's also the secondary level of, I don't know if it was just her partner or if they ever got married. Really unclear to me. But the man who they sit and they hold hands at when they face each other, I feel for him going through the exhibit and all the parts that he was a part of originally, like the two people facing each other, like sitting in the chair across from her, he's revisiting a part of his life. And I feel that is very a mirror stage of he can't go back to that. And the whole point of the mirror stage is it's the moment you become a self, you can't go back to being with your mother. You're your own individual and kind of going through his life in a way through the exhibit, I think is an interesting.
I think that he was one of the, if not the only person who has an ability to truly understand what that exhibit was about. Because I feel like a bunch of the other people who went to be a part of this were kind of more or less making it about themselves, about how they felt in this position. I don't remember who it was, but I think they were interviewing someone at the exhibit, and I believe it was a woman who said that it was sort of like it was a self-portrait, this performance that she was doing. And then there was that other woman who was from Australia who came all the way there, sat for 16 hours, and then immediately got kicked out because she stripped and just she was like she said something along the lines of, I wanted to be as vulnerable as she had been to everybody else. Like that doesn't quite seem what Mariana had in mind with the with this performance. This was about her this was about her and her sort of love for the world, as they had said.
Yeah.
And I think that people start to take it too personally. They misunderstand what the performance was about.
Yeah. I think that it isn't, I would argue that's not even about her. It's about being confronted with something that you're not normally confronted with. How often are you at an art gallery where the artist is present, where the
Yeah.
artist is there for the entire span of the gallery? Sometimes the artist will come to opening, but that doesn't mean they stay the entire run interacting with the people at the exhibit. Not even that she interacts, she kind of just sits there.
She is the art.
She is the art while being the artist who created it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the her lover coming back and her like and then like touching arms or whatever is kind of the maybe the real. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but I just like think that their relationship is kind of follows the same pattern of the mother and baby because like at one point they were like kind of one, like they were a team, and they were so like they matched each other's freak, like in terms of artistic like daringness or whatever. There's that video of them like just running like at each other and
Yeah.
like are literally getting beat up. Frank, yeah, I don't know. I think what, because how long were they together? I think they were together for like,
I don't think they ever got married, which
yeah.
but
Um,
art partners for a long time. I mean, they did the
There's
wall China thing.
I had heard of the Wall of China thing before, and I heard of that other one we were talking about where she was just basically she was just exposed where everybody could do it to her. I was like, I'd never realized that she was the same person. I've heard of these things before. I just didn't know it was
Yeah.
her. It was
All
all
the
her.
same
Yeah,
person.
I've seen like that video of like on Instagram Reels and like big bold letters. It's like, this artist sat down for 24 hours and like finally broke when her long lost lover
Which
came
isn't
back.
true.
Which yeah, now it's like, okay,
There
that
for
was
3 months.
fake news. Honestly, I think this is just like a little like comment, but I think this week's like readings and
Yeah, I thought
things were like the best. They were like way more interesting.
I think kind of the point of the artist is present is the idea of imago, of this perfect little image being created while it is in fact fragmented. It's not a whole. Because while you're walking through the art gallery, you're seeing different parts of her life, these fragmented pieces, and then at the end, you're sitting in front of the imago, or yeah, the imago of the artist being in front of you. But you're seeing her life through fragmented pieces, if that makes any sense to anyone else.
It does.
I think
Being
I
met
don't
with
know.
nothing is a really reassuring thing. No response to my comment. Cool.
No, because
I'll
the
my
imago is the perfect picture. Well, I
yeah,
have it, the imago is the perfect picture that the infant sees
yeah.
on
The
the other side.
infant sees. I have imago, the perfect little picture, and then underneath that, the infant sees itself as whole, but is fragmented.
So like heartbreaking. Like I'm sorry.
Like, but it's not meaning the baby itself is fragmented. It's meaning like the image that the baby is
Yeah,
seeing
yeah,
is fragmented. It's not
yeah,
a whole image. I mean,
yeah.
then you get into the whole like concept of cameras and projections being used through the exhibit of, it's not what you actually are seeing, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like her performance art is kind of used to break the imago
Mhm.
of like I don't know so many things of like what art should be, what performance art is, what like a woman's art should be, what a woman is, all these like different things. I think that's kind of what she's doing is breaking
I mean,
the
also,
imago. The
I, I agree
yeah.
with that. I think also maybe not the imago, but the gestalt, be an organized whole that is perceived as more than the sum of its parts.
Organized whole that is perceived to be the sum of its
As
parts
more than the sum of its parts.
as more. Oh, okay.
So like her being at the end is it's gestalt. So I think they kind of go together, like the imago helping shape the gestalt in ways. But I also think that moving away from the mirror stage and into the male gaze, she is never put on display. She's an art piece, but it's never in the context of being beautiful. It's never in the context of making a man feel like they have power over her.
Mm-hmm.
Debatable if you're looking at the piece where she is at the wearing clothes and then they're cut off of her during the exhibit by the audience. So like the women would tend to come up and cut off less clothing than the men would cut off.
It's about her being vulnerable and being
Yeah.
able to make a connection with the viewers or the audience.
Yeah. But I don't think that the artist's present exhibit is about the male gaze.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
I think that is very much more centrally the female gaze. I think the female audience members had a much more visceral reaction than the male audience members that sat across from her, except for her ex-partner Frank, who had a very emotional reaction, but that was not just because of the exhibit that he was seeing, but the history that they had with each other.
I was gonna go back to like the concept of gaze,
Mm-hmm.
um, and say like, the performance engages with that concept of gaze and as like an external force in a way. Like the subject's sense of like, I guess, mastery is
Mm-hmm.
kind of like destabilized. And a quote that I put is like, I see only from one point, but in my existence, I am looked at from all sides.
Mm-hmm.
And um and the artist is present, like the museum setting, like it kind of like amplifies that effect, and the audience gaze upon the person performing
Mm-hmm.
creates like a layered experience, I guess, like being both like observer as well as being observed
Yeah.
themselves. So
Because I mean, there's also always cameras on in that exhibit. They're always being photographed or recorded either by the movie group or by the audience members.
I don't know if this represents anything, and might be misremembering, but her dress color changed when they removed the table. It was originally red and then it turned to white. And I feel like that has to symbolize something.
I think it I think she has three dresses. I think there's a red, a black, and a white. And
It's
it
the
might be
black
based
one.
on the month that you're there.
Oh,
Mm.
Because if there's three, I could be wrong, but I'm like 95% sure there's definitely a red one. That's the one that she sees the Franken. There, I think, is a either dark blue or black one for towards the middle. And then the white, I think, is there's the obvious symbolization of like purity and like rebirth with white.
Mm.
That's when her art director sits down and kind of ends the exhibit by kissing her forehead, and then like she is able to stand up and move.
Like she just got baptized.
Yeah, like there's like a moment of rebirth, and like she's a different person than she was at the beginning of the exhibit.
he talks
And
about how
he
red.
does, yeah. And then the red at the beginning of like starting, like, I don't know what the red could symbolize. I mean, I
Well,
would
she
say
talks
like,
about how red symbolizes strength and stuff because when she was sick, that she had red oranges and she was in red sheets and she was red everything to give her strength so she could recover in time for her performance.
yeah. But I think there's also like another meaning of like, I'm trying to think of the right word of almost birth. Like you like there's like a purity of birth, and then there's also like pain that comes with birth. And I think that like starting in red and gradually moving to white is there's something to be said about it. And I don't think I have really the
It's
mental
the
energy.
real, imaginary, and the
Yeah.
symbolic. Like,
The white is the symbolic, the red is the real, and then the blue or black is the imaginary. Could be argued of like you start with the real being painful and
birth, yeah.
but even Manon mentioned the moment that like no one remembers of crying for your mother when you're hungry
Mm.
and there not being that person. It's in Lacan. It's like the moment of realizing that you are separate from them and they are not there for you in that moment. And that kind of pain also could be symbolized in the red.
I don't know if I mean the red and the white fit so perfectly with
Yeah.
real and symbolic that like black just has to be imaginary by default. I mean, I don't know, I guess imaginary, like, close your eyes and imagine when you close your eyes you see black
Yeah.
and there's the black dress. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Of just like maybe the mundaneness of the black in contrast to the bright red and the bright white.
Yeah, because I think, like the first month, you're fired up, you're excited for this art piece that you're doing. Second month, you're like, damn, like I got a whole other month of this. like, okay, like gotta stay strong, like da, da, da. And then like white, you're kind of like reflecting on everything.
Yeah.
You're like learning from what this gave you, all of
I
that.
also I didn't realize this while I was watching the documentary, but I realized it when they showed like a clip from the news of, or they explained it, where it wasn't just the doorway people that were facing each other. It wasn't just always a male female partner. It was sometimes female female or male male.
So now we will be talking about the music video by Ecca
Vandal,
Like a
cruise,
Ecca
vandal.
Vandal.
yeah,
Cruise, what is it?
cruising to self-soothe.
Cruising to Self-Soothe by Ecca Vandal. What I just jumping in here. Um, what I want to like, I don't think this video was male gaze at all. It kind of reminded what I thought. Okay, how I'm like gonna talk about this, and I'm gonna talk about scopopophilia. Scopopophilia.
Okay, go
That
for it.
yeah, it's the like experience that viewers get, or it's the pleasurable experience viewers get from looking at other people who are portrayed as passive objects. Um, so kind of like the male gaze.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't sure. I think like she was definitely her outfit was definitely like, kitty and like not kitty, but I
It
don't know.
didn't, yeah, it
It was a fun outfit.
was kitschy
Mm, yeah,
or
it was a
campy.
fun
It may have
outfit.
been, I think it was too intentional to be camp. So I'm
Mm,
going to call it kitsch. It's kitsch, like it has like all those different patterns and layers and textures
yeah,
to it, where
yeah,
it doesn't feel childish to me because it feels too intentional to be childish. Like I feel like when a child picks out an outfit, it's
yeah,
more haphazard than that feels. Like that felt
yeah,
intentional.
It feels like a child who picked out their outfit but grew up.
Yeah.
Like it
yeah.
feels
Who
like
just
an
came?
adult.
Yeah,
It feels like an adult who never really lost that childish instinct when it comes to choosing clothing.
Yeah.
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 Um.
Could
So
arguably connect to Lacan, but
yeah. So I'm kind of whatever that her like child like her very like
yeah.
fantastical outfit does kind of like give her like just like fun prop like doll vibes, but I don't think it's like an object like I
Yeah.
don't think she's being objectified, but like
Exactly.
this this whole like idea of scopopophilia and like objectifying women just makes me think of like this other idea of like femme lesbians being like very hyper femme as kind of like a rejection of men because like sure like we're gonna talk like clear cut men like and this is very stereotypical all that stuff all the all the trigger warnings but men like feminine women but I think there's a certain point on like that feminine scale
Yeah.
that is like too much for them. It's like when you like eat like candy that's too sweet. So I think a lot of like lesbian femme women, I don't know this woman's sexuality, but her outfit kind of just like reminded me of this idea that like lesbian femme women who don't want men in their lives, who like are not centering their lives around men, still dress very feminine, but it's to like reject men. It's to attract women and like reject men. I don't really, yeah.
Like the idea of hyperfemininity. Of
Yeah, the hyper femininity as like a rejection of all things like macho and stuff. So that's why like I don't think this is like male gazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think kind of going off of that, there's like hyperfemininity being used as a rejection and kind of what you're talking about of like this idea of this hyperfemininity being rejection, but can also attract the wrong kind of attention. Because
Well, yeah, because like, women, hyper femme women are still like obviously getting hit on by men, but they're like, I don't want to say commitment to their sexuality because it's like that's who they are, but they're like they're not that's not
Yeah.
who they're attracting with their outfit or whatever. Like so
Yeah.
they're doing it for themselves, but they're also like they're doing it to be perceived as queer by other queer women.
Yeah, I kind of remembered what I wanted to say of like it can be a rejection, but also there's an element of there are men who sexualize that. There's always going to be a group that, especially with like childishness, if you like go so far hyper femme that you're dressing like a little girl, there are going to be
Hmm.
that sexualize that aspect of your personality, even if that's not what you're intentionally trying to do. I mean, I can't think of a good example except for Melanie Martinez, and she's such a
Yeah.
like the worst person to ever exist. But like she's like a prime example of like this idea of like hyper feminizing yourself to a point where you're sexualized and then having to do like a complete 180 to something else, like because of like her new like weird mask thing. Like
Hmm.
we don't need to discuss it any further than that, but like this idea of like hyperfemininity being anti-male gaze
You
because
man should look up Melanie Martinez like mask phase.
yeah,
And I want to know his
but
thoughts.
mask, like not masculine,
Not masculine. I don't
mask,
think
like
he
a
was good.
physical
I don't think
mask
he was
that
a
she
Like
human.
wears.
mask, like
I just need to clarify that
Yeah, just like
she doesn't
look up.
turn really butch all of a sudden. She starts to become like a fairy creature. Like it's
Yeah, her like
a
her
really
like 2014 like doll,
schoolgirl,
schoolgirl doll, creepy porcelain doll, and then to like
a physical porcelain doll. Like
to
it
a
is
physical
actually
porcelain doll baby, and then like the masked creature, the masked singer or whatever, the masked creature. Like
yeah. But
yeah.
I think that can almost relate to this musician a little less severely. Obviously, I don't know her that well. I don't know if there has been a transition from like when she started. I mean, you can even look at other examples. I keep bringing her up because she just is very like into drag, but Chapel Roan has like that very similar like hyper femininity, but also has costumes where it's not hyper feminine, that it is more like, I think she did like a football outfit where she's wearing like football pads, which is not hyper
I think
feminine.
it was still like a cropped like
Yeah, it was still cropped, but it wasn't like it
pajama.
was, or even her new thing where she dresses up as a lawyer, a plumber, and like for the new album she's gonna release, which is a different vibe entirely.
Mm.
And then
Mhm.
even if you like, but she's been a musician for 10 years. Like if you look at her early stuff, she's just wearing like jeans and a t-shirt. Like there's going to be this evolution for every musician.
Because she got more money. Like,
She got more money and then
um,
She
yeah,
found what works for her and she stuck with it and it's working
yeah,
for her.
yeah. But I think like something similar could be said about the way that this person dressed. Like it feels costumey. Like I don't feel like that's something that you would walk around in her day-to-day life with.
mm-mm.
Like it is a persona that she's putting on. But again, I don't think it's male gaze. I
Yeah,
don't.
no. I think she has with the outfit she's wearing in the video that she's producing, like title, lyrics, all that stuff. I think she's trying to attract a certain audience. And that's probably just like other women who are like her.
All right. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of Lights Camera Media. We will see you next time to discuss about something else.